I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the new Kia Sorento, a car that we've had requested many times down below in the comments. Well, it's here, and the one I've brought today is actually the top spec GT-Line diesel. This is a Sorento with all the trimmings, and at 65 grand drive away, it's not cheap, but as we'll find out in today's video, you do get a lot for your money in this vehicle. You're really getting very close to a luxury car for mainstream sort of prices. Yeah, the top of mainstream prices, but this is a big 7-seater with heaps of premium features in the cabin. I love the new look of the Sorento as well. I think it's really tidy to look at both front and back. And then the cabin is actually something else again. When the first pictures of the new Sorento were released, I thought, wow, that cabin is really something special, very different to the Mazda CX-9 or the Toyota Kluger. And Kia are really doing their own thing. In America, I believe the Telluride is a really great looking SUV. It's looking like that won't come to Australia though, leaving the Sorento as the biggest of the bunch here. But it is bigger than before, and you get the benefit of that in the cabin. It's really wide, so there's heaps of space for passengers and odds and ends. And the technology is impressive. In the GT line, you get 2 digital displays. In the models underneath that, you do get this large screen here in the center, but you don't get a digital display in front of you. And the very base models actually run a slightly smaller screen over here as well. So if you can afford to splash out on the GT line, it really does feel worth it because it's very, very up to date in terms of tech. There's also a really good Bose stereo, and then really nice stuff like this quilted leather on the seats. Now these front seats are actually heated and ventilated via a toggle here, power adjustable on both sides, and the driver also gets memory. Speaking of toggles, although the controls are done in a really classy manner in the Sorento, we do have toggles for the temperature, for the seat heating and cooling, and for a couple of other features as well. There's almost an overload of air vents in this cabin, which means that the airflow continues to be really good. And here on the GT line, we actually have this circular shifter, which I think is a bit of a passing fad. But the GT line needs an electric shifter so that its smart park feature can work. You can drive this car in and out of parking spots from the key fob, which is kind of cool. The steering wheel is quite small, leather wrapped, feels good in the hand, and the rest of the materials in the cabin are okay, although they're not as good as you might expect. For example, down here, where my leg bangs against, it's completely hard. In fact, a number of the plastics below the belt line are hard, but up here on the doors and on the dash at least, it is soft, and this metal garnish is attractive. Plus we have big cup holders, lots of storage under the seat, and wireless smartphone charging here on the GT line. But what's it like in the second row? Let's find out. So with the driver's seat in my position, you can see that here in the second row, the room on offer is really great. Now, really big families will probably still want to go for a Kia Carnival, the MPV, but I can't tell you how much better the Sorento is to drive than that vehicle. The Carnival really feels like a van, a commercial van. The Sorento is a really impressive SUV to drive, as we'll find out in just a sec. And here in the back, the room is good. So for myself at 6 foot, I've still got another inch or so of headroom underneath this panoramic sunroof. Legroom's amazing. Tow room's really good. You can use the middle seat because even though this vehicle has all-wheel drive, there's a flat floor. Plus we have air vents, we have USB ports in the side of the front seats, another USB in the console, a 12-volt socket, and on the GT line, built-in sun blinds in the rear seat as well, and soft touch materials in the back and heated seats. So this is what I'm saying when I mentioned that the Sorento is really, really well equipped here at the top of the range, and it's definitely worth considering if you're shopping in this kind of price range. Now it is a 3-row vehicle, and I'll overlay a shot here of me clambering into the 3rd row so you can see how it works for adults. But you do have the ability to slide the center seats forward to create a bit of extra room for those in the back. And for this shot, I always have the 2nd row seat at its middle setting to kind of give you a bit of both. Now we'll head around to the boot, which I actually reckon is one of the Sorento's best angles. I reckon this kind of 70s, quite Americana styling is working well for Kia with their SUVs. The Telluride's a real looker, and the Sorento has followed in a similar vein. Plus this tailgate opens up to reveal a pretty practical boot. It's up in size to 821 litres if you're using it as a 5-seater. Plus, you're able to erect those 3rd row seats really easy. It's just a mechanical pull tab. It's not electrified, but it's nice and light. And if you're using it with 7 seats, you get 187 litres of space, which is a third up on the old Sorento. It's still reasonably compact, but you'll get the school bags back there if you're using this as a 7-seater without too much of a problem. And once again, it's really easy and simple to drop those rear seats. Now, here in the back, we do have controls to drop the center row. They're actually spring loaded, so that goes all the way down just with a press of a button, which is a real nicety. Under here, we have storage for the cargo cover, tire jack, and a few other odds and ends. And there is a spare wheel mounted to the bottom of the car. Electric controls for the tailgate mean that we can jump in and see what this diesel-powered SUV is like to drive. Right, so we found out that the Sorento is pretty impressive here in the cabin and it looks good outside, but how does the driving experience stack up? Well, to be honest with you, it stacks up really well, and I'm very keen to get the Sorento into a comparison with the likes of the Mazda CX-9, because I really think that among the mainstream priced large 7-seat SUVs, the Sorento will really be duking it out with the best in this segment, because the dynamics are relaxed and yet still controlled, and so you can put the Sorento down a country road and feel confident, but nobody's getting car sick, nobody will feel that it's boaty, but neither will anybody, feel like the suspension is too firm or sort of too uncomfortable in that way. It strikes a really good balance between agility and long distance cruising ability as well. So that recipe really starts with what is under the bonnet. Got a pretty traditional engine for a vehicle in this segment, in that the Sorento is still a diesel and it's a 2.2 litre unit. Sounds familiar for a Kia, but it's actually a new iteration of this brand's 2.2 litre 4-cylinder diesel engine. It's a smart stream engine, as the Hyundai and Kia group is labeling this technology. And so that means it's basically kept similar outputs, but it's increased its efficiency. So those outputs are a little bit up. We have 148 kilowatts of power and 440 Newton meters of torque. So torque's down ever so slightly, but power is bumped up a tiny bit, but really the experience is quite similar in terms of the amount of power and torque, but it's really how it gets to the road that's quite different. Firstly, the new iteration of this 2.2 litre engine is quite a bit more refined. It doesn't have that sort of trucky agricultural note that it once did. You can certainly tell it's a diesel, but if we listen, it's not especially loud, nor is it especially frustrating or annoying to the ear. I think you could put up with it just fine. But there is a different gearbox, and it's quite different. So this engine used to be paired with a torque converter auto. It's now a dual clutch automatic, but it's actually a very seamless dual clutch. The only environments where I've found that you can tell it's a DCT is if you're going uphill. So the ramp out of our work car park, for example, is uphill. You kind of have to stop and wait for the door. And I found that there's a little bit of hesitation just in that scenario, but everywhere else it's really well tuned. And this is Kia's new dual clutch, and I think it works really well, and it's a well done gearbox, and it pairs nicely to the 4-cylinder diesel engine and keeps it really, idling really low when you're just cruising on the highway, which is nice. Speaking of cruising on the highway, it's something the Sorento does really well, but equally it feels quite comfortable getting about in town. And the fuel economy is excellent for the diesel. I managed 7.3 litres per 100 combined, which for the size of the car, I think is pretty impeccable. And on the highway, you can get that down to, 6.5 without having to try too hard. There is a 3.5 litre naturally aspirated V6 petrol coming soon, and that weighs less and costs $3,000 less, but it's front wheel drive only, and it's significantly less economical. You're going to be looking at a fuel use figure closer to 12 or 13 litres per 100 Ks than 7. So it's really up to you whether you're looking for economy and all-wheel drive, or if you want kind of a lusty, free revving petrol V6, you'll be able to choose one or the other. In terms of ride and handling, the Sorento is pretty good. I really like the tuning of the steering. It's not that feelsome, but the ratio is pretty much perfect for a car like this. And you can plot a good line and a safe line through the corners, because Kia have opted to put Continental Conti Premium Contact rubber on the Sorento. So better tyres than some of its rivals, and so the grip levels you're able to sustain in the corners is actually pretty impressive in this vehicle. Now the ride is excellent on everything up to the 19-inch wheels that you can get with the Sorento. So last week I was driving the Sport Plus grade with the diesel. It's one rung under this car, and the ride was magnificent. The GT line, which I'm in now, steps up to 20s and also a slightly wider tyre and the ride diminishes considerably. It's still not bad, it's not uncomfortable, but you can certainly feel the bumps in the road much more prominently. I'd say the ride's 20 or 30% worse on 20s than 19s, which is a bigger margin than you would usually get, but it does mean that if you're after a particularly comfortable 7-seater, I'd probably go for the Sport Plus. But if you do that, you will be foregoing some cool tech that's exclusive to the GT line, things like the blind spot view cameras, the 360-degree camera, the digital instrument cluster, the Bose speakers, and the best seats. So it's kind of annoying that you have to make that trade-off between all the tech and the ride. Thankfully though, the Sorento does have good safety tech across the range. AEB for cars, pedestrians and cyclists is standard. Junction AEB is standard, plus a center airbag. So this car complies with the requirements for 5 stars in 2020 here in Australia. We've got lane keep assist, we've got adaptive cruise control, we've got blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alert with cross traffic braking. Now, if you step up to the Sport, that also adds in tire pressure monitoring. Meanwhile, the GT line picks up the cameras that I've already mentioned, and it also gets rear AEB for when you're reversing, which I think is a really critical tech that ideally would be range wide as well. So those are our detailed impressions of the new Kia Sorento, one of the most impressive vehicles in the large SUV class. If you're thinking about buying a CX-9 or a Kluger, I would definitely test drive the new Sorento, as it really does have a lot to offer. That diesel engine is really flexible, the interior punches above its weight in most ways, the material selection is perhaps not one of them, and the size of it feels about right to me. But I'm keen to know what you think, so let me know down below in the comments. Is the Sorento a car that you're considering? Do you like the direction Kia are taking their design in? While you're there, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.